Back in early January, I released a video detailing my plans to compare the new Olympus 150 to 400mm and the Sony 2 to 600mm lenses. That was many months ago, and in that time I've been driving the roads and mountain passes, skiing the backcountry, navigating trails, paddling lakes and rivers, and working in several parks close to my home here in Montana. My desire to put these lenses to the test encouraged lots and lots of frames, with subjects large and subjects small. In a wide variety of conditions, including a frigid winter in Yellowstone, to across the Pacific Ocean to the tropical rainforests in Indonesia. With a coincidental total of 21,000 images from each lens, I've had more than enough opportunities to see what each of these optics are really capable of. Towards the end, we finished up in the majestic Rocky Mountains, the never-ending Dakota Plains, and finally into the wetlands of my boyhood home in northern Minnesota. The time I had to test these two lenses was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and it was a dream assignment, living out of the back of my Ford F-150, self-quarantining with the animals. Both of these zooms provide the kind of magnification that you need for serious natural history image production in both stills and video. Even in my early days as a young photographer, I've always felt that zoom lenses are absolutely indispensable, and that enthusiasm was mostly due to the speed of composition without having to move my feet. My appreciation for zooms all began in 1982 with my purchase of Nikon's first professional zoom, the Nikkor 80 to 200mm f2.8. Most photographers at the time just weren't convinced a zoom lens was sharp enough for professional results, but I was confident that even if a zoom was somewhat less sharp, the number of additional images I would gain being able to recompose quickly would far outweigh somewhat less than perfect optics. I think these covers, all shot with zoom lenses, prove my point. So let's get at it. Let's get started dissecting these two very impressive zoom lenses. So today I thought it'd be a good time to talk about some of the lens details, some of the buttons and the switches and the smoothness of the zoom mechanism, the smoothness of the focus mechanism, etc. Let's go over the Sony first. We have the typical switches and we have autofocus to manual focus, so you can switch back and forth pretty easily between manual focus and autofocus. We have the different focusing ranges here. We have full, we have 10 to dash 2.4 meters, and we have 10 meters to infinity. This is a helpful switch when you're shooting birds in flight, things that you might miss focus on, and the lens doesn't have to rack all the way out for birds in flight. In particular, I'll put it on 10 meters to infinity because I know the bird's not going to get any closer than 10 meters. So that's what that's for. This is the first generation A9 and the 2 to 600mm lens. Here he comes. Oh, he landed. They're not graceful, these little guys. Okay, so here we go. So now we're trying the Sony A9 with a 2 to 600mm lens. Once again, a group pattern for autofocus. And we'll get a chance to see how this camera handles it. Optical steady shot. This is the image stabilization system in the Sony cameras. We've got either on or off. I never turn it off. I know that there's been some discussion, typically had to do with the original image stabilized lenses, that it was better to turn it off on tripod. When I use it on my tripod, I will leave the head kind of loose and just hold it, and then the image stabilization compensates for any movement I might have. But you do have the option to turn it off and on. I very seldom ever turn it off. You've got your different modes here, which is for image stabilization. 1, 2, and 3. I keep it on 2. I found that with autofocus, it's better set for birds in flight at 2, which I used to shoot it when I first got it on 1, but had done some reading and research and found that everybody was having better luck with the optical steady shot set to number 2. We have the focus ring ahead of the switches. Here's your focus ring. It's very smooth and very silky. It focuses beautifully. And the only time I generally use it is if I switch my camera to manual focus for some reason, but I almost never use manual focus. The zoom ring on the Sony is exceptionally smooth and silky. Really, really nicely done, especially when you think about how inexpensive this lens is. It's really well done. You'll notice this tape here. This is camo tape that doesn't stick to the lens. I just put it on here. It helps protect the lens. We have the dial here that is for the tripod collar that allows you to tighten it and loosen it. Ability to go from vertical to horizontal if you're on tripod. The lens hood, it's plastic, but I don't have a problem with that. You line it up here, it snaps into place, and it works well. We have the 2 camera strap lugs here, which allows you to put a strap on the lens. It's always a good idea to have the strap attached to the lens on something this heavy because it will put a lot of torque and pressure on the lens mount if you don't. So that's where I attach my camera straps. One of the things I really like about the Sony is this little knob for the tripod collar that you can loosen up, and there's a switch underneath all this tape. I'm not going to take that off. It's a little spring-loaded button actually that you push on, and then you can slip this tripod collar off. So if you decide you don't want the tripod collar on, you can take it off. It gives you a little less weight. I typically don't take it off, but it is very nice that it comes off. My Olympus does not, which we'll show you in a minute. So that's pretty much it for the Sony. It has all the basics that you need, the switches, the tripod collar, very smooth tripod collar. That's pretty much all there is to it, but it's very well built. He's got a bug. So now let's take a look at the Olympus. We have very similar switches here. This is for the autofocus. It's got 1.3 to 6 meters. It's got 13 meters to infinity, and it's got 6 meters to infinity. And so generally, I would shoot 6 meters to infinity, especially for birds in flight. And that 6 meters to infinity helps the camera return quicker if it loses focus, and it doesn't have to travel the entire length of the autofocus system. It has your autofocus manual focus switch here that you can quickly turn the autofocus off. You've got your image stabilization on or off. You've got the function button lock FN preset. This is something that the Sony doesn't have. It's a way that you can use the function buttons to preset a specific spot that you want to focus on and set those FN buttons up for that. It's got the beep on and off switch. So those are the main switches on the left side of the camera. But what's really unique about this lens is the built-in teleconverter, which allows you to add a 1.2 times magnification by just flipping this switch. You've got a lock so that you can lock that in place. I do wish that Olympus had something in the viewfinder that tells me this is on, because I often forget when I have it on, and I generally like to start out not using it, and then if I need a little more reach I can quickly turn it on. It's really, really a nice feature. You've got a button for autofocus to select a particular spot. You hit one of the FN buttons up here and it will take you to that spot automatically. The zoom ring on the 150 to 400 is exceptionally smooth. This might be a little tighter than the Sony. Neither one is anything but just buttery smooth and really feels nice. The manual focus ring on this lens is spectacular, maybe a little better than the Sony. Really, really easy to manually focus. It has composite lens hood. It goes on like so. Use this knob to screw it down and tighten it on, and that's very well done. The tripod collar, love to see this tripod collar have the ability to be taken off. You can shoot this system so well handheld that I really wish I had the option, very similar to the Sony, to just a little knob that I could loosen it up and pull it off really quickly. That would really be ideal. So some of you may be wondering, what is this little bump right here? When you flip this switch on and off, the teleconverter pops in and out. It requires that it has a little more room, and the bump is the spot where that teleconverter goes to and is the reason for it being there. Another important element of these two lenses is what each one weighs. In the Olympus it's 4.1 pounds. With the Sony it's 4.6 pounds. They're pretty comparable. Not a lot difference in weight, but it is noticeable. When I pick up the two rigs, one without a battery grip on the Sony and one with the EM1X, which has the built-in battery grip, this feels actually lighter, even though the combination of these two is actually heavier than the combination of the Sony and the 2-600. Something about the Olympus that is very well balanced, whereas the Sony feels very much front heavy. It may be just the fact that I'm using it with the bigger body that has a battery grip attached. So that's pretty much all there is for the physical characteristics of these lenses. Let's get out and do some more work in the field. So we've got a really great opportunity to showcase what this lens can do. We've got the Wapiti pack here out in a very, very far distance. I'm guessing it's almost probably 3/4 of a mile. They're laying down, they're sleeping, and you can barely even see them. They look like rocks on the ridge. This is a typical situation of what I used to call wolf dots. And until this lens, I would never even stop and try to photograph anything in this situation. But with this lens, it becomes a 300 to 800 millimeter lens with the 1.2 teleconverter built in. I flip it down to the 1.2 and it becomes a 1000 millimeter lens. And then I put a 2x teleconverter on it. This goes on. And now this lens is up to 2000 millimeters. So we now have the Sony 2-600 and the Sony A9 camera body on this. And when I looked through there and I shot some pictures at 600 millimeters, they pretty much look like wolf dots. So now we're going to take and we're going to put a 1.4 teleconverter on there. Not something I like to do in the field, putting teleconverters on, changing lenses, but you know, we're going to do it for this project. And the reason I don't like doing it is that you have the potential for getting dust and so forth in the camera, and we don't like that. So anyway, now we got the 1.4 on. Let's shoot a frame or two with the 1.4. It's looking a little better. So this is 840 millimeters. So now we're going to go one step further. We're going to take the 1.4 off and put a 2x teleconverter on it. With a 2-600 at 600 millimeters and a 2x teleconverter, we have 1200 millimeters. So let's get some pictures with this. Okay, so it looks better than it has, but they're still pretty tiny. So that's an in-the-field comparison. These two lenses, the Olympus 150-400 and the Sony 2-600, this is a situation where having a lot of magnification can really help you get some pictures of things that you wouldn't normally be able to get. So in my ongoing comparison of the Sony 2-600 and the Olympus 150-400 millimeter, I'm seeing some things that are a little frustrating. Here with the Olympus, which is I missed that picture because of exactly what I was going to tell you about. So I'm photographing bald eagles and I've got my sunglasses on. It's a very bright day here at high altitudes in the American West. I have snow on the ground, lots of sunshine, and I need my sunglasses. Shooting the Olympus 150-400 on the EM1X, I cannot see through the EVF with Polaroid sunglasses on. I don't know why. There's something about the combination of the two. It basically just blacks it out. So you saw me flip my sunglasses up to try to get a bald eagle that just came in through here, and I missed it because it took too long. So with the Sony 2-600 on the Sony A7 IV, the Sony A9, not a problem. I've never experienced it on any other camera except the Lumix. Lumix does it as well, but only in vertical format. Most of my stuff is shot horizontal today. It really is a problem when shooting in bright sunlight. And we really need to use our sunglasses in these situations. So it's a very frustrating deal that I hope they fix. So we've talked about the magnification factor, and the thing that I really love about the 150-400 is it becomes a 300 to 800 millimeter lens. And now that's because of the crop sensor of the Micro Four Thirds system, that lens becomes 300 to 800 millimeters. So one of the questions I'm being regularly asked is, what about the Sony 2-600 on a larger censored body like the A7R Mark IV in crop mode? In crop mode, we will get on the Sony as much as 900 millimeters. So this is the Sony 2-600. It's on the A7 Mark IV, and I've set the A7 Mark IV up for the AEL lock button back here. When I push it, it sets it into crop mode. So that's like an APS size sensor. That takes the 61 megapixel sensor down somewhere, I believe, to like 36 megapixels. That's a tremendous size file still. So I've been testing that, and we're going to see how those pictures look. It is a reasonable thought when people say, well, you've got the smaller sensor in the Micro Four Thirds, but we can get almost as much magnification out of the Sony 2-600 because the 600 becomes 900 as opposed to the Olympus being up to 1000 millimeters with the 1.2 teleconverter. Okay, another interesting thing. These are things that you forget about as you're shooting. You cuss them and then you just go on. But you saw that I shot a couple of frames, and that was at 600 millimeters, so the eagle was quite a ways up there. So I hit the button immediately after I shot the 2 frames, and I get a message up in the viewfinder that says writing to card. So it will not let you change that crop sensor until it's done writing to the card. So I didn't get any crop censored pictures of that eagle as it went by. So we've got a beaver on the edge of the bank, and he's feeding on what look like aspen leaves, or popple, as we call them here in Minnesota. And I'm shooting video of him right now. Video is not easy to shoot handheld with any system. One of the most incredible things that's happened for wildlife and natural history photography is the development of really high quality image stabilization. And when working from a kayak, it's been invaluable. And in this situation, I'm using the Olympus EM1X with the new 150 to 400 millimeter lens. And it's been absolutely imperative to have the quality image stabilization that you get from a camera like this. All cameras today pretty much have image stabilization, and Olympus is known for pushing the envelope. In the EM1X with the 150 to 400, we have as much as 6.5 stops of image stabilization. So that's really important. So we've come to the end of this comparison project, and along the way during my 18 plus months of using these two lenses, it's become obvious which one has turned into my go-to lens. Both of these optics produce fantastic results, with the Olympus being somewhat sharper. It also had the advantage of more reach, up to 8 stops of image stabilization, and very good autofocus. The Olympus autofocus system isn't perfect, but it's still very, very good. But it was my 8 weeks in the Northwoods of Minnesota that really convinced me about the Olympus. Shooting from a kayak for most of those 2 months reminded me that good wildlife photography is all about being mobile. The ability to shoot from a kayak with the extreme magnification of a 1000 millimeter lens is something I could have never done with any other system. So those are some of my thoughts about these two wonderful lenses. Although this video doesn't cover every minute detail, there's enough to give you a good idea of the differences. For more details and sample images that you can download, you can check my blog out. With all that said, I do have one regret, and that is I should have actually really made this lens comparison between the less expensive Olympus 100 to 400 and the Sony 200 to 600 millimeter lens. When I started this project, the smaller, cheaper Olympus wasn't available. The smaller Olympus and the Sony are nearly the same in light gathering capabilities, and they're much more comparable in price, with the Olympus selling for $14.99 and the Sony at $19.99. So who knows, that may be another video. I've actually got one of the new 100 to 400s and I'm testing it now. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you like what you see, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Until next time, I'm Daniel Cox with Natural Exposures TV, wishing you happy photographic trails.